limited by money. You are not limited by opportunity. You are limited by how you think. Trillionaires don't exist because of luck. They exist because they operate on a level most people never reach. They don't make excuses. They don't wait for motivation. They don't think small, even for a second. They think bigger, act faster, and stay disciplined longer than anyone else. If you still think like everyone else, you will live like everyone else. Average thinking creates average results. This audiobook will force you to break that cycle. You will learn to think differently. You will learn to act without hesitation. You will learn to eliminate every excuse. Because the moment you think like a trillionaire, your entire life begins to change. Chapter 1. Stop thinking small immediately. Small thinking feels comfortable. That's why most people never leave it. It protects you. It keeps you safe. It keeps you from embarrassment, from failure, from judgment. But it also keeps you stuck. And that's the part most people ignore. You don't stay small because you're incapable. You stay small because you've trained yourself to think small. Every time you lowered your expectations, every time you said, "This is enough," every time you avoided a bigger goal because it felt uncomfortable, you reinforced a pattern. And now that pattern is controlling your life. Listen carefully. Small thinking is not harmless. It is not neutral. It is a silent limiter. It quietly decides how much you earn, how much you grow, how much you experience. And if you don't break it right now, it will define your entire future. You have a choice. You can keep thinking the way you've always thought, or you can upgrade your thinking starting today. That's the key. Small thinking is a habit, not a reality. You weren't born thinking small. You learned it. You learned it from your environment, from people who played safe, from systems that reward average behavior, from fear disguised as being realistic. You heard things like, "Don't aim too high. Be practical. Take what you can get." And over time, you accepted those limits as truth. But they were never truth. They were just limitations passed down from people who never pushed beyond them. You don't need their permission. Let that sink in. You don't need permission to think bigger. You don't need approval to set higher goals. You don't need validation to demand more from your life. Yet most people wait for it. They wait for someone to tell them they're ready. They wait for a sign. They wait for confidence. And while they wait, they stay exactly where they are. You have a choice. Stop waiting. The cost of thinking small? Every small thought has a cost. It costs you opportunities you never even see. It costs you actions you never take. It costs you growth you never experience. When you think small, you act small. You choose the easier path. You settle for less. You avoid risk. And over time, that becomes your identity. I'm just this kind of person. I don't aim that high. I'm okay with where I am. But are you really? Or have you just convinced yourself that you are? That's the key. Most people don't lack ambition. They lack the courage to think beyond their current reality. They shrink their vision to match their comfort zone. And that is where they stay. Not because they have to, but because they choose to. You have a choice. Trillionaire thinking starts with vision. Trillionaire minds don't start with resources. They start with vision. They don't ask, what can I realistically do? They ask, what is possible if I refuse to think small? That's a different question, and it creates a different life. When you think bigger, your brain starts searching for bigger solutions. When you raise your standards, your actions begin to match them. This is how transformation begins. Not with money, not with connections, but with thinking. You must expand your vision daily. Not once, not occasionally, daily. Because your old thinking will try to pull you back. It will say, that's too much. That's not for you. Stay where you are. And if you listen, you lose. So you override it. You replace it. You repeat, if it doesn't challenge me, it won't change me. Say it again. If it doesn't challenge me, it won't change me. That's the standard now. Raise your targets relentlessly. Look at your current goals. Be honest. Are they truly challenging? Or are they comfortable? Most people set goals they know they can reach. Why? Because it protects their ego. If they succeed, they feel good. If they fail, it doesn't hurt too much. But that's not growth. That's maintenance. And maintenance keeps you average. You are not here to maintain. You are here to expand. So raise your targets. Double them. Then question them again. Make them uncomfortable. Make them demanding. Make them so big that your current habits can't support them. That's the point. Because when your goals demand more, you are forced to become more. You have a choice. Stay comfortable or grow. Bigger standards create bigger actions. Thinking bigger is not just about goals. It's about standards. What do you tolerate? What do you accept? What do you allow in your life? Small thinkers tolerate mediocrity. They accept delays. They accept excuses. They accept inconsistency. But trillionaire minds reject all of it. They demand excellence from themselves first. They show up when they don't feel like it. They push when it's uncomfortable. They finish what they start. Not because it's easy, but because it's required. That's the key. Your standards shape your actions, and your actions shape your results. So raise your standards. Not tomorrow, now. Take bigger actions immediately. Thinking big without action is useless. It's just fantasy. You don't become powerful by imagining a bigger life. You become powerful by acting toward it. So ask yourself, what is one action you've been avoiding because it feels too big? That's the one. Do it. Send the message. Start the project. Take the risk. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need their permission. You just need to move. You have a choice. Act now or stay stuck. Break the pattern of playing safe. Playing safe feels logical, but it's not. It's emotional. It's driven by fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort. And every time you choose safety over growth, you reinforce that fear. You make it stronger. So you have to break the pattern. Deliberately. Choose discomfort. Choose challenge. Choose the path that stretches you. Because that's where growth lives. That's where transformation happens. Repeat it again. If it doesn't challenge me, it won't change me. You must decide who you are becoming. At the end of the day, this is about identity. Are you someone who thinks small or someone who refuses limits? Because you can't have both. You can't think small and live big. It doesn't work that way. Your thinking defines your direction, and your direction defines your life. So decide, right now, who are you becoming? Someone who plays safe? Or someone who expands relentlessly? You have a choice. That's always the truth. Chapter takeaway. Small thinking is the enemy. It hides behind comfort. It disguises itself as logic. But it keeps you exactly where you are. If you want a different life, you must think differently. Bigger goals, higher standards, stronger actions. And you repeat it until it becomes real. If it doesn't challenge me, it won't change me. But thinking bigger is only the first step. Because the moment you decide to think big, you will face resistance. Excuses will appear. Doubt will grow. Your mind will try to pull you back. That's why the next step is critical. You must eliminate every excuse. Because if you don't, you will fall back into small thinking again. And that's exactly what we're about to destroy next. Chapter 2. Eliminate every excuse. Excuses are easy. That's why they are dangerous. They don't feel like failure. They feel like reasons. They feel logical. They feel justified. But they are lies. Not loud lies. Not obvious lies. Quiet ones. The kind that sound reasonable, but keep you exactly where you are. Excuses are mental shortcuts to failure. Read that again. Every time you use one, you avoid responsibility. You avoid discomfort. You avoid growth. And the more you use them, the stronger they become. Until one day, they control everything you do. You have a choice. You can keep explaining why things aren't working, or you can eliminate every excuse and start executing. That's the key. Excuses feel safe, but they destroy you. Excuses protect your ego. They help you avoid feeling weak, unprepared, or afraid. Instead of saying, "I didn't do the work," you say, "I didn't have time." Instead of saying, "I was scared," you say, "It wasn't the right moment." Instead of saying, "I avoided the challenge," you say, "I'll do it later." It sounds harmless, but it's not. Because every excuse reinforces a pattern. Avoid, delay, stay the same. And if you repeat that pattern long enough, it becomes your identity. I'm busy. I'm tired. I'll start soon. But soon never comes. You have a choice. Stop protecting your ego or start building your life. Time is not your problem. Most people say they don't have time. That's the excuse. But the truth is different. You don't lack time. You lack priorities. Everyone has 24 hours. The difference is how you use them. You find time for what matters. You make time for what you value. So when you say, "I don't have time," what you're really saying is, "This is not important enough." That's the truth. And it's uncomfortable. But discomfort is where growth begins. That's the key. So stop saying you don't have time. Start asking better questions. What am I doing that doesn't matter? What can I eliminate? What must I prioritize right now? Because time is not the issue. Decision is. You have a choice. Use your time with intention or waste it with excuses. Energy is not an excuse. You say you're tired. Of course you are. Everyone is. But exhaustion is not a reason to stop. It's a signal to become stronger. You don't build power when it's easy. You build power when it's hard. When you feel tired and still act, that's growth. When you feel drained and still push forward, that's discipline. But when you stop every time you feel low, you train weakness. And weakness compounds, day after day, choice after choice, until effort feels impossible. You have a choice. Act based on your feelings or act based on your standards. That's the difference. Trillionaire minds don't wait for energy. They create it through action. They move first, and momentum follows. Repeat it. No excuses, only execution. Fear is the most dangerous excuse. Fear is the one that stops everything. It tells you you're not ready. You might fail. People will judge you. And instead of challenging it, you listen. You obey. You step back. And you call it being careful. But it's not careful. It's avoidance. Fear is not a signal to stop. It's a signal to act. Because everything you want is on the other side of it. That's the key. If it scares you, it matters. If it challenges you, it's worth doing. But most people run. They delay. They distract themselves. They convince themselves it's not the right time. And they stay stuck. You don't need their permission. You don't need certainty. You need courage. And courage is built through action, not waiting. You have a choice. Face fear or let it control your life. Excuses kill momentum. Momentum is everything. Once you start moving, things get easier. Ideas flow faster. Energy increases. Confidence builds. But excuses stop momentum before it starts. They delay your first step. And without that first step, nothing happens. So you stay in preparation mode, planning, thinking, waiting, but never doing. And that is the trap. Because action creates clarity, not the other way around. You don't figure it all out first. You move and then adjust. That's how progress works. That's how power is built. You have a choice. Stay stuck in your head or start moving in reality. Replace excuses with action. This is where everything changes. You don't eliminate excuses by thinking differently. You eliminate them by acting differently. Immediately. Every time an excuse appears, you interrupt it. You replace it. You act. I'm tired. Do it anyway. I don't have time. Make time now. I'm not ready. Start unprepared. This is how you break the pattern. Through repetition, through discipline, through action. That's the key. Because action rewires your identity. It teaches your brain, I don't stop, I execute. And once that becomes your default, everything changes. Repeat it again. No excuses. Only execution. You must become ruthless with yourself. No one else will do this for you. No one will eliminate your excuses. No one will force you to act. This is your responsibility. And it requires honesty. Brutal honesty. You must catch yourself in the moment, when you hesitate, when you delay, when you justify inaction. And you must shut it down. Immediately. No negotiation, no debate, just action. Because the longer you think, the weaker you become. You have a choice. Be soft with yourself or be strong for your future. Execution builds identity. You don't become powerful by thinking about it. You become powerful by doing. Every time you act without excuses, you build a new identity, an identity of discipline, an identity of control, an identity of execution. And that identity compounds day after day, action after action, until it becomes automatic. You don't hesitate anymore. You don't overthink anymore. You just move. That's the goal. Not perfection. Execution. That's the key. Stop waiting. Start moving. There is no perfect moment. There is no perfect plan. There is no perfect version of you coming later. There is only now, and what you do with it. Every delay is a decision. Every excuse is a choice. So decide, will you keep waiting or will you start moving? Because the difference between average and unstoppable is execution. Simple. Not easy, but simple. Chapter takeaway. Excuses are not real barriers. They are habits, patterns of thinking that keep you comfortable and keep you stuck. Time is not the problem. Energy is not the problem. Fear is not the problem. Your response is the problem. And your response is a choice. So you replace excuses with action. Every time. Without hesitation. Without negotiation. No excuses, only execution. But eliminating excuses is only the beginning. Because once you start acting, you will face pressure, stress, uncertainty, emotional reactions. And if you can't control your emotions, you will fall back into excuses again. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to control your emotions relentlessly. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 3. Control your emotions relentlessly. Your emotions are powerful, but uncontrolled, they are destructive. They feel real. They feel urgent. They feel like truth. But most of the time, they are temporary reactions. And if you act on every reaction, you lose control of your life. That's the reality. Emotional reactions destroy long-term success. Not instantly, not dramatically, slowly, quietly. One bad decision at a time. One impulsive reaction at a time. One moment of weakness at a time. Until the damage is done. You have a choice. You can react like everyone else, or you can control yourself like very few people ever will. That's the key. Most people are controlled by their emotions. Look around. People react to everything. Stress? They panic. Criticism? They get defensive. Failure? They quit. They don't think. They don't pause. They just react. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Because reaction is not power. Reaction is weakness. It means something external controls you. Someone says something and your mood shifts. Something goes wrong and your focus disappears. You feel discomfort and you stop. That's not control. That's dependency. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need perfect conditions to stay focused. You need discipline. You have a choice. Be controlled by your emotions or control them. Calm is a competitive advantage. When everyone else is emotional, calm becomes power. When others panic, they make mistakes. They rush decisions. They lose clarity. But if you stay calm, you see clearly. You think better. You act smarter. That's the advantage. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being in control. Big difference. You still feel everything, but you don't let it control your actions. That's the key. Trillionaire minds stay steady under pressure. They don't rise and fall with every situation. They remain stable. And that stability creates consistency. Consistency creates results. Repeat it. I control my emotions. My emotions don't control me. Again, I control my emotions. My emotions don't control me.
Pause before you react. This is where control begins. Not with suppression, not with denial, with a pause. Every emotional reaction has a moment, a small gap between trigger and action. Most people ignore it. They react instantly. But that gap, that is your power. That is your control. So you train it. Something triggers you, you pause. You breathe. You think. Then you act. Simple. Not easy, but simple. And the more you practice this, the stronger your control becomes. You have a choice. React instantly or pause and take control. That's the key. Stop making decisions in emotional states. When you're angry, you don't think clearly. When you're afraid, you don't act boldly. When you're frustrated, you don't make smart choices. So why do people keep making decisions in those states? Because they don't control themselves. They let emotions dictate timing. They say things they regret. They quit when they should persist. They act when they should wait. And then they deal with the consequences. You don't do that anymore. You delay decisions when emotions are high. You wait. You stabilize. Then you decide. Because clarity comes from calm. That's the key. You have a choice. Make emotional decisions or make powerful ones. Train emotional discipline daily. Control is not automatic. It's trained. Every day. In small moments. When you feel annoyed, stay calm. When you feel lazy, take action. When you feel frustrated, stay focused. This is your training. Not big moments, small ones. Because how you handle small emotions determines how you handle big ones. That's the key. You don't wait for pressure to learn control. You build control before pressure arrives. So when it does, you're ready. Repeat it again. I control my emotions. My emotions don't control me. Detach from immediate feelings. Your feelings are not facts. They are signals, temporary ones. But most people treat them as permanent truths. I feel tired, so I stop. I feel scared, so I don't act. I feel unsure, so I delay. That's the trap. Because feelings change constantly. So if you base your actions on them, you become inconsistent. And inconsistency kills progress. You must detach. Feel it, but don't follow it blindly. Acknowledge it, but don't obey it. That's control. You have a choice. Follow every feeling or lead yourself despite them. Silence your internal chaos. Your biggest emotional battle is internal. It's the voice in your head. Doubt, fear, overthinking. It keeps talking. It keeps reacting. It keeps creating noise. And if you listen to it, you lose focus. So you silence it. Not by fighting it, by ignoring it. You shift your attention to action. Because action quiets the mind. Movement reduces doubt. Execution
replaces overthinking. That's the key. You don't need perfect clarity to act. You create clarity by acting. You don't need their permission. You don't need certainty. You need control.
Pressure reveals your true level. Anyone can stay calm when things are easy. That's not impressive. Real control shows under pressure. When things go wrong, when stress rises, when outcomes are uncertain. That's when your training is tested. That's when your discipline matters. So don't avoid pressure. Use it. Let it expose your weaknesses, then fix them. Because pressure doesn't break you, it reveals you. You have a choice. Avoid pressure or use it to become stronger. Emotional control builds power. When you control your emotions, you control your actions. When you control your actions, you control your results. It all starts here. This is not optional. You can have the best strategy, the best plan, the best opportunities. But if you lose control emotionally, you lose everything. That's the truth. So you train relentlessly. Every reaction matters. Every moment counts. You stay calm. You stay focused. You stay disciplined. Repeat it one more time. I control my emotions. My emotions don't control me. Chapter takeaway. Emotions are not the enemy. Lack of control is. If you react to everything, you will never stay consistent. If you lose control under pressure, you will never reach your full potential. So you train yourself to pause, to think, to act with intention, not reaction. Because calm is power, control is strength, and discipline is everything. You have a choice. React like everyone else or rise above it. I control my emotions. My emotions don't control me. But controlling your emotions is only one part of the equation. Because once you gain control, you must direct that control towards something bigger. You must think beyond the moment, beyond today, beyond short-term comfort. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to think in decades, not days. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 4. Think in decades, not days. Most people think about today. Some think about this week. A few think about this year. Almost no one thinks in decades. And that is why almost no one builds anything truly powerful. Short-term thinking creates weak decisions. It feels good in the moment. It gives quick rewards. It satisfies your emotions right now. But it destroys your future. Quietly. Every time you choose comfort over growth, every time you choose easy over necessary, every time you choose now over later, you weaken your long-term position. You have a choice. Think like everyone else, or think like someone building something that lasts. That's the key. Short-term thinking keeps you average. Short-term thinking asks one question. What feels good right now? That's it. And when that becomes your filter, you make weak choices. You skip the hard work. You delay the difficult decisions. You avoid the uncomfortable path because it doesn't feel good today. But what feels good now often costs you later. Comfort today, regret tomorrow. Ease now, struggle later. That's the trade most people keep making without realizing it. They optimize for today and sacrifice their future. You don't do that anymore. You have a choice. Chase comfort or build something bigger. Trillionaire minds play the long game. People who build real power don't rush.
They don't panic over short-term setbacks. They don't chase instant results. They think long. Years, decades, generations. Because they understand something most people don't. Time is the greatest multiplier. Small actions repeated daily become massive results over time. Disciplined habits compound into unstoppable momentum. But only if you stay consistent. That's the key. If you quit early, you never see the results. If you jump from one thing to another, you reset the process every time. And that's why most people stay stuck. They don't give anything enough time to grow. You must be different. You must commit longer, stay focused longer, endure longer. You don't need their permission. You need patience. Stop needing immediate results. This is where most people fail. They want results now. They work for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then they expect change. When it doesn't come fast enough, they quit, or they switch direction, or they lose belief. That's weakness, not lack of ability, lack of endurance. Because real growth takes time, longer than you think, longer than you want. That's the truth. So you stop expecting instant rewards. You stop measuring success by immediate outcomes. You focus on the process, daily execution, daily improvement, daily discipline. That's what builds long-term success. You have a choice: demand fast results or commit to lasting ones. Sacrifice comfort today for power tomorrow. This is the trade, and you cannot avoid it. You either sacrifice now or you sacrifice later. You can choose discipline today or regret tomorrow. You can choose discomfort now or limitation later. There is no third option. But most people try to avoid the sacrifice. They choose comfort. They sleep instead of working. They scroll instead of building. They relax instead of improving. And they tell themselves it's fine. It's just one day. I'll start tomorrow. I deserve a break. But those small decisions add up. They compound. And over time, they define your life. That's the key. Your future is built by what you do today. Not once, repeatedly. You have a choice. Choose comfort or choose growth. Build with a long-term vision. What are you building? Not today, not this week. Long-term. If you don't know, you will drift. You will react instead of lead. You will follow instead of create. And you will stay average. Because without vision, there is no direction. And without direction, there is no progress. So you define it clearly. Where do you want to be in 10 years? What kind of person do you want to become? What kind of life are you building? Not vague answers, precise ones. Because clarity creates focus, and focus creates results. That's the key. You don't need their permission to think big. You need commitment to follow through. Think beyond immediate pain. Short-term thinking avoids pain. Long-term thinking uses it. When something is hard, most people stop. They say, "This isn't for me. This is too much. I don't want to feel this." So they quit. But discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a sign you are growing. It means you are stretching beyond your current limits. And that's exactly where you need to be. So you lean into it. You stay in it. You move through it. Because you understand, this pain is temporary. But the growth is permanent. You have a choice. avoid discomfort, or use it to become stronger. Delay gratification relentlessly. This is one of the most powerful skills you can build. The ability to wait, to delay rewards, to resist impulses, to stay focused on what matters long term. Most people can't do it. They want everything now. And that desire makes them weak because they give in too easily. They trade long-term success for short-term pleasure every time. But you don't. You train yourself to delay, to say no to distractions, to say no to easy options, to say no to immediate gratification. Because you are building something bigger, something that requires discipline. That's the key. Repeated. I build for the future, not for comfort. Again, I build for the future, not for comfort. Consistency over time creates dominance. Anyone can work hard for a day, or a week, or even a month. But very few people stay consistent for years. That's where separation happens. That's where dominance is built. Not in intensity, in consistency. Doing the work when it's boring, when it's repetitive, when it feels like nothing is happening. That's when most people stop. But that's when you continue. Because you understand, results are delayed. Growth is invisible at first. But if you stay consistent, it shows. Eventually. And when it does, it compounds fast. You have a choice. Be intense for a short time, or be consistent for a long time. Stop resetting your progress. Every time you quit, you reset. Every time you switch direction, you reset. Every time you abandon discipline, you reset. And that's why most people never get far. They keep starting over, again and again, always busy, never progressing. You don't do that anymore. You commit. You stay. You push through the slow phases, because that's where most people drop out. And that's where you gain the advantage. That's the key. You are building a future identity. This is bigger than results. This is about who you become. Every long-term decision shapes your identity. Disciplined or distracted. Focused or scattered. Powerful or average. You are building that identity daily through your choices. So think long, act long, commit long. Because the person you become is the foundation of everything you will achieve. You have a choice. Stay who you are or become who you need to be. Chapter takeaway. Short-term thinking keeps you trapped. It feels good now, but it limits everything later. If you want real success, you must think beyond today, beyond this week, beyond this year. You must think in decades, because that's where real power is built, through time, through consistency, through discipline. So you sacrifice comfort now. You delay gratification. You commit to the long game. Repeat it. I build for the future, not for comfort. But thinking long-term is not enough. Because even with vision, even with discipline, you will still face moments where you don't feel like acting, where motivation disappears, where energy drops. And if you rely on motivation, you will stop. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to execute without waiting for motivation. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 5. Execute without waiting for motivation. Motivation feels powerful. When it's there, You feel unstoppable, focused, driven, ready. You say, "This is it. This time I'll change." But then it disappears. And when it disappears, so does your action. That's the problem. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is permanent. Read that again. If you depend on motivation, you will always be inconsistent. You will start strong and stop quickly. Again and again and again. Until starting feels pointless. You have a choice. You can wait to feel ready, or you can act regardless of how you feel. That's the key. Motivation is a trap. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. It rises when things are easy. It disappears when things get hard. So if your action depends on it, your progress will always be unstable. Think about it. How many times have you felt motivated, started something, and then stopped when the feeling faded? That's the cycle. Excitement, action, resistance, stop. Over and over. Not because you lack ability, but because you rely on emotion. And emotion is weak. It shifts. It changes. It lies. You don't build power on something that disappears. You build it on discipline. You have a choice. Follow your feelings or follow your standards. Discipline is your real advantage. Discipline doesn't care how you feel. That's why it works. When you're tired, discipline acts. When you're bored, discipline continues. When you're unmotivated, discipline executes. It removes the debate. No overthinking, no hesitation. Just action. That's the key. Because the moment you remove emotion from the decision, you become consistent. And consistency is power. Not bursts of energy, not temporary focus. Daily execution. Even when it's boring, even when it's repetitive, even when it feels pointless. That's where real growth happens. You don't need their permission. You need discipline. Act especially when you don't feel like it. This is where most people fail. They act when it's easy. They stop when it's hard. But the real shift happens when you reverse that. You act when you don't feel like it, especially then. Because that's when discipline is built. Anyone can work when they feel good. That's not impressive. But working when you don't feel like it? That's rare. That's powerful. That's what separates you. You have a choice. Wait for the right feeling or create the right results. Consistency beats intensity every time. Most people try to go all in. They push hard for a few days, maybe a week. Then they burn out. Then they stop. That's intensity without consistency. And it doesn't work. Because success is not built in spikes. It's built in repetition. Small actions done daily, over time. That's what compounds. That's what creates real results. You don't need to do everything at once. You need to do something every day. That's the key. Consistency beats intensity every time. Repeat it. Consistency beats intensity every time. Remove the need to feel ready. You are not supposed to feel ready. You are supposed to act anyway. Waiting for readiness is just another form of delay. It sounds responsible. It feels smart. But it keeps you stuck. Because readiness never comes. There is always doubt, always uncertainty, always fear. So if you wait for the perfect moment, you will wait forever. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need perfect confidence. You don't need their permission. You need to move. Now. You have a choice. Wait until you feel ready, or become ready through action. Build a non-negotiable standard. Execution must become automatic, not optional, not dependent on mood. Non-negotiable. Like breathing, like showing up, like doing what must be done. No debate, no excuses, no delay. You decide once, and then you follow through every time. That's discipline. That's power. Because once something becomes non-negotiable, you stop wasting energy thinking about it. You just do it. That's the key. Decide what must be done, and refuse to negotiate with yourself. Break the habit of stopping. Starting is easy. Stopping is the problem. You stop when it's uncomfortable. You stop when it's boring. You stop when it's slow. That's the habit, and it's destroying your progress. Because every time you stop, you reset momentum. You go back to zero again. So you break that pattern. You don't stop. Not because you feel strong, but because you've decided. That's the difference. Decision over emotion. You have a choice. Keep restarting or keep going. Action creates momentum. You don't wait for momentum. You create it through action. The first step is always the hardest because your mind resists it. It looks for reasons to delay, excuses to avoid. But once you start, things shift. Energy increases. Focus sharpens. Resistance fades. That's momentum. And it only comes after you begin. That's the key. You don't need motivation to start. You need action to create motivation. Train yourself to execute instantly. Speed matters. The longer you wait, the weaker your decision becomes. You start questioning, doubting, overthinking. And then you don't act. So you shorten the gap. Decision, action. Immediately. No delay, no overthinking. You feel resistance? You move anyway. That's how you train execution. That's how you build power. You have a choice. Hesitate or move instantly. Identity is built through action. You don't become disciplined by thinking about it. You become disciplined by acting like it. Every time you execute, you reinforce a new identity. I am someone who follows through. I am someone who acts. I am someone who doesn't quit. And over time, that becomes real. That becomes who you are. Not because you said it, because you proved it. That's the key. Action builds identity, not intention. Chapter takeaway. Motivation will fail you. Every time. It will rise and then disappear. And if you depend on it, you will stay inconsistent. So you replace it with discipline, with standards, with action. You act when you feel like it, and you act when you don't, especially when you don't, because that's where growth lives. Repeat it. I act regardless of how I feel. Again, I act regardless of how I feel. This is how you build consistency. This is how you build power. This is how you become unstoppable. But execution alone is not enough. Because even when you act, you can still waste time on the wrong things. Low-value thinking, distractions, unfocused effort. And if you don't control that, you will stay busy, not productive. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to obsess over high-value thinking. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 6. Obsess over high-value thinking. Your life follows your thoughts, not your intentions, not your plans, your thoughts. What you think about daily becomes what you act on, becomes what you build, becomes who you become. That's the truth. And most people are thinking about the wrong things constantly. Low-value thoughts, useless worries, endless distractions, and they wonder why nothing changes. Low-value thoughts waste time and energy. Not just a little, a lot. Because your attention is your most valuable asset. Where it goes, your life follows. You have a choice. Focus on what matters or get lost in what doesn't. That's the key. Most people are mentally distracted all day. Look at your day. Be honest. How much of your thinking is actually useful? How much of it moves you forward? And how much of it is just noise? Scrolling, comparing, overthinking, replaying conversations, worrying about things you can't control. That's low-value thinking. It feels active, but it produces nothing. No growth, no progress, no results, just mental fatigue. And when your mind is tired, your actions become weak. That's the connection. Weak thinking equals weak action equals weak results. You have a choice. Stay distracted or take control of your thinking. High-value thinking is intentional. You don't accidentally think powerful thoughts. You choose them deliberately. High-value thinking focuses on solutions, growth, execution, leverage. Not problems without action, not emotions without direction, not distractions without purpose. It asks better questions. What moves me forward? What creates results? What matters long term? That's the shift. Because better questions create better thinking, and better thinking creates better decisions. That's the key. Stop feeding your mind garbage. You can't think powerfully if you constantly consume nonsense. What you watch, what you read, who you listen to, it shapes your thinking every day. If you fill your mind with distraction, you become distracted. If you fill your mind with negativity, you become reactive. If you fill your mind with low standards, you lower your own. Simple. So you cut it aggressively. You don't need their permission. You don't need to explain it. You remove anything that weakens your focus. That's discipline. That's control. You have a choice. Consume mindlessly or consume with intention. Focus only on what creates growth. Not everything deserves your attention. Most things don't. So you become selective, ruthless with your focus. You ask, does this grow me? Does this build something? Does this move me closer to my goals? If the answer is no, it goes. No hesitation, no justification. Because every second spent on low-value thinking is time stolen from high-value action. That's the cost. And it adds up, day after day, hour after hour, until you look back and realize you've been busy, but not productive. You have a choice. Be busy or be effective. Leverage your thinking for power.
High-value thinking is not just about effort. It's about leverage. Doing less, but achieving more. Thinking in ways that multiply results. Instead of asking, how can I do more work? You ask, how can I create more impact? That's different. That's powerful. Because leverage changes everything. It turns small actions into big outcomes. It turns focus into force. That's the key. Think smarter, not just harder. Cut distractions without mercy. Distraction is not harmless. It is destructive. It breaks your focus. It weakens your thinking. It delays your progress. And it's everywhere. Your phone, social media, notifications, people who waste your time. You must cut it aggressively. Not later, now. Because every distraction trains your brain to lose focus. And once your focus is gone, your power is gone. You have a choice. Protect your attention or lose it. Train deep focus daily. Focus is a skill. And like any skill, it must be trained. You don't build it once. You build it daily. By eliminating interruptions. By staying on one task. By pushing through boredom. Because boredom is part of focus. If you can't handle it, you will always look for escape. And that escape will destroy your consistency. So you stay. You work. You finish. No switching, no checking, no distraction. That's discipline. That's high-value thinking in action. Repeat it. If it doesn't add value, I eliminate it. Again, if it doesn't add value, I eliminate it.
Stop overthinking. Start directing. Overthinking feels productive, but it's not. It's avoidance. It delays action. It creates doubt. It drains energy. So you stop it. You don't let your mind wander endlessly. You direct it toward solutions, toward action, toward progress. Because thinking is only valuable if it leads to execution. That's the key. No action, no value. Guard your mental environment. Your environment shapes your thinking, not just physical, mental. What you allow into your mind determines how you think, so you protect it, like it matters, because it does. You avoid negative conversations. You limit exposure to useless content. You surround yourself with growth-focused input. You don't need their permission to change your environment. You take control, because if you don't, it will control you. Your attention is your currency. Time is valuable, but attention is everything. You can have time, but if your attention is scattered, you produce nothing. That's why focus is power. It turns effort into results. It turns thinking into action. It turns potential into reality. So you treat your attention like currency. You invest it wisely. Not everywhere, not on everything, only where it creates value. You have a choice. Spend your attention carelessly or invest it strategically. Chapter takeaway. Your thinking determines everything. If your mind is filled with low-value thoughts, your life will reflect it. Distraction, confusion, lack of progress. But if you control your thinking, everything changes. You focus on growth. You act with intention. You eliminate what doesn't matter. That's how power is built. So you become ruthless with your attention, with your environment, with your thoughts. Repeat it. If it doesn't add value, I eliminate it. This is how you think like a trillionaire. But even with high-value thinking, even with focus, you still need something deeper. Because thinking alone doesn't build results. Discipline does. Silent, consistent, unseen discipline. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to build silent discipline. And that's exactly where we're going next.
Chapter 7. Build Silent Discipline. Most people want to be seen. They want recognition. They want validation. They want someone to notice their effort. They want applause before they've earned results. That's the problem. Because real power doesn't grow in public. It grows in silence. Real power grows quietly. No noise, no attention, no validation. Just work. Just repetition. Just discipline. And most people can't handle that. Because when no one is watching, they stop. When no one is praising them, they slow down. When no one cares, they lose motivation. That's why they stay average. You have a choice. Chase attention or build real power. That's the key.
Validation is a weak foundation. If you need recognition to act, you are already losing. Because recognition is inconsistent. Sometimes you get it. Most of the time, you don't. And if your effort depends on it, your discipline will collapse. That's the truth. You cannot rely on external approval. You cannot depend on people clapping for you. Because most people won't. And even if they do, it won't last. So what happens then? You stop? Exactly. That's why validation is dangerous. It makes you dependent. And dependency destroys discipline. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You need results. That's the shift. Work when no one is watching. This is where separation happens. Not in public. Not when it's easy. Not when people are paying attention. In private. When no one is watching. That's where discipline is built. That's where habits are formed. That's where real progress happens. But it's also where most people quit. Because there's no reward. No immediate feedback, no praise, no recognition, just effort. And effort without validation feels uncomfortable. So they stop. But you don't. You continue. Because you understand something they don't. The work you do in silence creates the results people see later. That's the key. You have a choice. Work only when seen, or build when no one is watching. Stop announcing. Start executing. Talking feels productive. Posting feels like progress. Sharing your plans feels like movement. But it's not. It's a substitute. A weak one. Because talking about what you will do is not the same as doing it. And the more you talk, the less you act. That's the pattern. You release the pressure through words instead of execution. So you feel like you've done something, but you haven't. That's the trap. You must break it. You stop announcing. You stop explaining. You stop seeking attention for effort. You execute. Quietly, relentlessly. That's the key. Discipline without recognition builds strength. When you keep going without validation, you build something powerful. Internal strength. You become self-driven, self-controlled, self-reliant. You don't need anyone else to push you. You don't need reminders. You don't need rewards. You act because you decided to. That's discipline. And it's rare, because most people rely on external pressure, deadlines, expectations, opinions. But when that pressure disappears, so does their effort. You are different. You create your own standard, and you follow it no matter what. You have a choice. Depend on external pressure or build internal power. Consistency in silence creates dominance. Anyone can perform once. Few can repeat it daily, without attention, without excitement, without reward. That's where dominance is built. Not in moments of intensity, in quiet consistency. Doing the work, even when it feels repetitive, even when it feels invisible, even when it feels slow. Because it is slow at first, but that's how compounding works. Small actions, repeated consistently, turn into massive results over time. That's the key. You don't need to be loud. You need to be consistent. Protect your process. Not everything needs to be shared. Not everything needs to be seen. Your growth, your work, your progress. Keep it protected. Because when you expose everything, you invite distraction, opinions, criticism, noise. And that noise can weaken your focus. So you limit it. You keep your process private. You stay locked in. Because the goal is not attention. The goal is results. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You need discipline to stay focused. Detach from immediate recognition. Recognition feels good. That's why it's addictive. But addiction weakens control. If you need recognition now, you lose patience. You rush the process. You seek shortcuts. You compromise quality just to feel something. But that destroys long-term success. So you detach. You stop needing immediate praise. You delay it. You focus on the work. Because you understand, recognition comes later, after results, not before. That's the key. Silence builds focus. When you remove noise, you gain clarity. When you stop talking, you start doing. When you stop seeking attention, you increase concentration. That's the shift. Silence is not weakness. It's control. It allows you to go deeper, to think clearer, to execute better. And that gives you an edge. Because while others are distracted, you are building quietly, relentlessly. You have a choice. Be loud and distracted, or silent and focused. Let results speak for you. You don't need to prove anything. Not with words, not with explanations, not with promises. Results speak. Always. They don't need validation. They don't need approval. They stand on their own. So you stop trying to convince people. You stop trying to impress. You stop trying to be seen. You build. You execute. You improve. And when the results come, they speak for you. That's the key. You are building an invisible advantage right now, while no one is watching, while no one is paying attention. You are building something. Skill, discipline, focus, consistency. And no one sees it. That's fine. Because when it shows, it will be undeniable. And people will call it sudden. They will say, you got lucky. They will say it happened fast. But you will know the truth. It was built in silence. That's the advantage. and it only belongs to those who stay consistent without attention. You have a choice. Chase visibility or build invisibly.
Repeat the standard. This is your mindset now. I win in silence. Say it again. I win in silence. When no one is watching, you work. When no one cares, you improve. When no one is praising, you continue. That's discipline. That's power. That's how you separate yourself.
Chapter takeaway. Real power is not loud. It doesn't need attention. It doesn't need validation. It grows quietly, through consistent, disciplined action, in private, when no one is watching. So you stop seeking approval. You stop announcing your plans. You stop depending on recognition. And you build, silently, relentlessly. Repeat it. I win in silence. Because that is how real success is built. But silent discipline alone is not enough. Because even if you work hard, even if you stay consistent, you can still blame external factors, circumstances, people, situations. And if you blame, you lose control. That's why the next step is critical. You must take full responsibility for everything. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 8. Take full responsibility for everything. Most people want control, but they don't want responsibility. They want better results without owning their actions. They want success without accountability. And that's why they stay stuck. Because blame keeps you weak. Responsibility makes you powerful. Read that again. Blame feels good. It protects your ego. It shifts the weight. It gives you someone else to point at. The situation wasn't right. They didn't support me. I didn't get the opportunity. It sounds valid, but it does nothing. Because the moment you blame, you give away control. And if you don't have control, you can't change anything. You have a choice. Blame everything or take ownership of everything. That's the key. Blame is a mental escape. Blame is easy. That's why people use it. It removes pressure. It removes responsibility. It removes discomfort. But it also removes growth. Because if it's not your fault, why would you change? Why would you improve? Why would you take action? You wouldn't. And that's the trap. Blame keeps you exactly where you are. Not because you can't do better, but because you've decided not to. That's the truth. And it's uncomfortable. But discomfort is where power begins. You don't need their permission to take ownership. You just need honesty. Brutal honesty. You have a choice. Protect your ego or build your life. Responsibility gives you control. The moment you take responsibility, everything changes. Because now it's on you. And that's not a burden. It's power. If your results come from your actions, then your future can change. If your outcomes are your responsibility, then you can improve them. That's the shift. From victim to creator. From reactive to intentional. That's the key. Because control doesn't come from circumstances. It comes from ownership. You have a choice. Stay powerless or take control. Every result comes from your actions. Look at your life. Not emotionally, objectively. Your results are not random. They are patterns. Patterns of thinking. Patterns of behavior. Patterns of decisions.
What you do repeatedly creates what you experience. That's the truth. So if something isn't working, you don't complain. You evaluate. You ask, what did I do to create this? What can I change? What must I improve? That's responsibility. Not blame, not excuses. Ownership. You have a choice. Complain about your results or take responsibility for them.
Stop pointing. Start fixing. Pointing fingers feels productive, but it's not. It wastes time. It keeps you focused on others instead of yourself. And you cannot control others. You cannot change them. You cannot rely on them. But you can control you, your actions, your decisions, your standards. So you shift focus from outside to inside. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what can I do about it? That's the difference. That's the key. Fixing creates progress. Blaming creates stagnation. Own the outcome, no matter what. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter who was involved. It doesn't matter if it was unfair. You still take responsibility. Not because it's your fault, because it's your life. That's the mindset. Extreme ownership. Everything that happens, you take it. You analyze it. You learn from it. You improve because of it. That's power. Because now nothing can stop you. No situation, no person, no setback. You adapt, you adjust, you move forward. You have a choice. Resist reality or take control of it. Responsibility forces growth. When everything is your responsibility, you cannot stay the same. You are forced to improve. You can't hide behind excuses. You can't delay action. You can't avoid discomfort. Because it's on you. That pressure creates growth. It pushes you. It forces you to think better, act better, become better. That's the key. Responsibility is not heavy. It's transformative. It turns weakness into strength. Stop waiting for external change. Most people wait. They wait for better conditions, better timing, better opportunities. They think, when things improve, I'll act. But things don't improve because they don't act. That's the cycle. Waiting, no action, no change. You break it. You don't wait for change. You create it. Through responsibility, through action, through ownership. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect timing. You need to move. Now. You have a choice. Wait for change or create it. Turn problems into power. Problems are not the issue. Your response is. Most people see problems and feel stuck. They complain, they avoid, they blame. But you don't. You use problems. You turn them into fuel. You ask, what is this teaching me? How can I grow from this? What can I do differently next time? That's responsibility. That's power. Because now every setback becomes progress. Every failure becomes feedback. Every challenge becomes growth. That's the key. Build an identity of ownership. This is about identity. Who are you? Someone who blames? Or someone who owns everything? Because you can't be both. You either take responsibility or you avoid it. And that choice defines you. So you build the identity through action. Every time something goes wrong, you own it. Every time something fails, you learn from it. Every time something needs fixing, you step up. That's who you become. Not by saying it, by doing it. Repeat it. Everything is my responsibility. Again, everything is my responsibility.
No more excuses, only solutions. Excuses are easy. Solutions require effort. So most people choose excuses. But you don't. You eliminate them completely. You don't explain why something didn't work. You fix it. You don't justify delays. You execute. You don't avoid problems. You solve them. That's the shift. From excuse-driven to solution-focused. That's the key.
You control the direction of your life. Not everything is under your control, but your response is. And your response determines everything. How you react, how you adapt, how you move forward. That's where power lives. Not in perfect situations, in controlled responses. So you take ownership of everything. Your actions, your thoughts, your results. Because that is how you take control of your life.
Chapter takeaway. Blame is weakness. It feels good, but it keeps you stuck. Responsibility is power. It forces growth. It creates control. It builds strength. So you take ownership of everything. No excuses, no blaming, no waiting. You own it. You fix it. You improve it. Repeat it. Everything is my responsibility. Because that is how you take control. But responsibility alone is not enough. Because once you take ownership, you must act on it. Decisively, quickly, without hesitation. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to make decisions faster and stronger. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 9. Make decisions faster and stronger. Hesitation is silent, but it's destructive. It doesn't look like failure. It doesn't feel like quitting. It feels like thinking, analyzing, being careful. But in reality, hesitation kills momentum, and momentum is everything. Without it, you slow down. You doubt yourself. You lose direction. And eventually, you stop. Not because you can't move forward, but because you waited too long. You have a choice. Hesitate and lose momentum, or decide and create it. That's the key. Most people overthink everything. They don't act. They analyze. They replay scenarios. They imagine outcomes. They search for certainty. And while they're thinking, nothing happens. No movement, no progress, no results. Just mental noise. Overthinking feels productive, but it's not. It's delay. It's fear in disguise. Because the truth is simple. You're not thinking because you need clarity. You're thinking because you're afraid to act. That's the reality. And until you accept it, nothing changes. You don't need their permission to decide. You need courage. You have a choice. Stay in your head or move in reality. Speed creates power. The faster you decide, the faster you move. The faster you move, the faster you learn. And the faster you learn, the faster you grow. That's the cycle. But hesitation breaks it. It slows everything down. You wait. You delay.
You question. And while you're stuck, others are moving. Not perfectly, but consistently. And that's why they win. Not because they're smarter, because they're faster. That's the key. Speed creates advantage, not recklessness. Decisive action. You will never have perfect information. This is where most people get stuck. They want certainty. They want guarantees. They want to know the outcome before they act. But that's impossible. You will never have all the information. You will never feel 100% ready. There will always be unknowns, always risks, always doubt. So waiting for certainty is just another excuse. You don't eliminate uncertainty. You move through it. That's how progress works. You have a choice. Wait for perfect clarity or create clarity through action.
Decide first, adjust later. This is the mindset shift. You don't need perfect decisions. You need decisions. Because decisions create movement, and movement creates feedback, and feedback creates improvement. That's the process. You decide, you act, you learn, you adjust. Not the other way around. Most people try to refine before they start. That's why they never start. You reverse it. Action first, adjustment later. That's the key. Repeat it. I decide, I act, I refine. Again, I decide, I act, I refine.
Hesitation comes from fear of being wrong. You hesitate because you're afraid. Afraid of failure. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of making the wrong choice. So you delay. You wait. You avoid. But here's the truth. You will be wrong sometimes. You will make bad decisions. You will fail. That's part of growth. Not something to avoid. Something to expect. Because every mistake teaches you. Every wrong decision sharpens your thinking. Every failure builds experience. That's the key. You don't fear being wrong. You use it. You have a choice. Avoid mistakes or learn from them.
Confidence comes from action. Most people think confidence comes first, then action. But it's the opposite. Confidence comes after action. You don't become confident by thinking about it. You become confident by doing, by trying, by failing, by improving. That's how it's built. Step by step. Decision by decision. So if you're waiting to feel confident, you'll wait forever. You must act first. Confidence follows. That's the key. Indecision drains energy. Every time you delay a decision, you carry it in your mind. It drains your focus. It wastes your energy. It creates stress. Because unfinished decisions create pressure. They sit there, waiting. And the longer you ignore them, the heavier they feel. So you eliminate them quickly. You decide. You act. You move on. That's how you protect your energy. You have a choice. Carry decisions or clear them. Train yourself to decide instantly. Decision-making is a skill. And like any skill, it improves with practice. So you train it. You stop delaying small decisions. What to do, when to start, how to act. You decide quickly. You execute immediately. Because speed becomes a habit. And habits define your behavior. So the more you practice decisive action, the more natural it becomes. That's the key. You don't wait. You move.
Strong decisions require strong standards. Weak people hesitate. Strong people decide. Why? Because they have standards. They know what they want. They know what matters. They know what they stand for. So decisions become easier because everything is filtered through those standards. If it aligns, they act. If it doesn't, they reject it. Simple. No confusion, no delay. That's power. You have a choice. Be unclear or define your standards. Momentum is built through decisive action. Momentum doesn't come from thinking. It comes from doing. Every decision you make pushes you forward. Every action you take builds energy. And that energy compounds until movement becomes natural, until progress becomes automatic. But hesitation stops it every time. So you eliminate hesitation. You decide fast. You act fast. You adjust along the way. That's how you build unstoppable momentum. Repeat it again. I decide. I act. I refine.
Chapter takeaway. Hesitation is the enemy. It looks harmless, but it destroys momentum. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you overthinking. It keeps you average. So you replace it with decisive action. You don't wait for certainty. You don't wait for confidence. You decide. You act. You refine. That's the system. That's the mindset. That's the key. Because speed creates growth. Action creates clarity. And decisions create results. You have a choice. Stay stuck in indecision or move forward with power. I decide. I act. I refine. But making decisions is only part of the process. Because once you act, you will face resistance, pressure, difficulty, setbacks. And if you're not mentally strong, you will break. That's why the next step is critical. You must develop mental toughness daily. And that's exactly where we're going next.
Chapter 10. Develop mental toughness daily. Most people want an easy life. Less pressure, less stress, less discomfort. They think comfort is the goal. It's not. Comfort is what makes you weak. Pressure is what makes you powerful. Read that again. Pressure is not your enemy. It's your training ground. Everything you avoid, everything you run from, everything that feels too hard, that is exactly what you need. But most people escape it. They look for easier paths. They reduce difficulty. They lower their standards. And then they wonder why they don't grow. You have a choice. Avoid pressure or use it to build power. That's the key. Pressure reveals who you really are. Anyone can look strong when things are easy, when there's no stress, no resistance, no challenge. But that's not real strength. Real strength shows under pressure. When things go wrong, when outcomes are uncertain, when you feel like stopping, that's when your true level is revealed. Not what you say, not what you plan, what you do. Do you push forward or do you break? That's the difference. That's the truth. You don't need their permission to be strong. You prove it through action. You have a choice. Collapse under pressure or rise through it. Discomfort is required for growth.
You cannot grow without discomfort. It's impossible, because growth means change, and change is uncomfortable. New habits feel hard. New challenges feel unfamiliar. New levels demand more from you, and your mind resists it. It wants comfort. It wants safety. It wants ease. But comfort keeps you the same, so you reject it. You lean into discomfort on purpose. You choose the harder path. You do the difficult task. You stay when it feels uncomfortable, because that's where growth lives. That's the key. Stop running from difficulty. Most people run. At the first sign of resistance, they step back. This is too hard. This isn't for me. I'll try something else. That's weakness. Not lack of ability. Lack of endurance. Because difficulty is not a sign to stop. It's a test. A filter. It separates those who quit from those who continue. And the ones who continue win. Not because it's easy, because they don't stop. You have a choice. Run from difficulty or push through it.
Train your mind to endure. Mental toughness is not natural. It's built through repetition, through exposure, through pressure. You train it daily by doing what you don't feel like doing, by staying when you want to quit, by pushing when it gets hard. Small moments, every day. Because how you handle small discomfort determines how you handle big pressure. That's the key. You don't wait for tough situations, you prepare for them. The harder it gets, the stronger you become. Most people see difficulty as a problem. You see it as progress. Because every challenge forces you to adapt. Every obstacle forces you to improve. Every setback forces you to grow. That's how strength is built. Not in comfort, in resistance. So when things get harder, you don't panic. You don't complain. You lean in. Because you understand. This is making me stronger. Repeat it. Pressure builds my power. Again. Pressure builds my power. Control under pressure. Pressure is not the issue. Your reaction is. Some people panic. Some people freeze. Some people quit. But you don't. You stay controlled. You breathe. You focus. You act. Because control under pressure is power. That's the key. You don't eliminate pressure. You master your response to it. You have a choice. React emotionally or respond with discipline. Stop expecting it to be easy. This is where most people fail. They expect things to be smooth, fast progress, quick results, minimal resistance. And when reality doesn't match that expectation, they lose motivation. They say, "This is too hard." But it's supposed to be hard. That's the point. If it were easy, everyone would do it. There would be no advantage, no separation. Difficulty is what creates opportunity, because most people avoid it. You don't. You embrace it. That's the difference. Build resilience through repetition. You don't become mentally tough overnight. You become it through repetition. Doing hard things. Again. And again. And again. Even when it's boring. Even when it's frustrating. Even when it feels slow. Because repetition builds resilience. It strengthens your ability to continue, to endure, to push through. That's the key. Consistency under pressure creates toughness.
Turn pain into fuel. Pain is inevitable. You will feel it. Failure, rejection, frustration, fatigue. It's part of the process. But what you do with it defines everything. Most people avoid pain. They escape it. They numb it. They run from it. You use it. You turn it into fuel. You let it drive you, push you, strengthen you. Because pain has energy. And if you direct it, it becomes power. You have a choice. Avoid pain or use it. You are training for something bigger. Every challenge you face is preparing you for something bigger. More responsibility, more pressure, more opportunity. But if you can't handle small pressure, you will break under big pressure. That's why this matters. This is training. Every difficult moment is building your capacity. So you don't waste it. You use it. You grow from it. That's the key. Repeat the standard. This is your mindset now. Pressure builds my power. Say it again. Pressure builds my power. When it gets hard, you push. When it gets uncomfortable, you stay. When it gets intense, you focus. That's mental toughness. That's discipline. That's power. Chapter takeaway. Pressure is not the enemy. Avoiding it is. Because pressure builds strength. Discomfort creates growth. Resistance develops power. So you stop running. You stop avoiding. You stop expecting ease. And you start training. Daily. Through action. Through endurance. Through discipline. You push through discomfort on purpose. Because that is how you become stronger. Repeat it. Pressure builds my power. But mental toughness alone is not enough. Because even if you are strong, even if you endure, you can still lose focus. And without focus, your effort is scattered. Your energy is wasted. That's why the next step is critical. You must learn to focus like nothing else exists. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 11. Focus like nothing else exists. You don't lack time. You lack focus. That's the truth. Most people are not failing because they're lazy. They're failing because they are distracted. Constantly. Notifications, social media, people, noise, pulling their attention in every direction. And when your attention is divided, your power is divided. Distraction is the enemy of greatness. Read that again. Not lack of talent, not lack of opportunity. Distraction. Because greatness requires depth. And depth requires focus. You have a choice. Stay distracted or become dangerous with your focus. That's the key. Most people never truly focus. They try for a few minutes, maybe an hour. Then they check their phone. They switch tasks. They lose momentum. Again and again. This is how most people work. Shallow attention, constant interruption, zero depth. And they wonder why progress is slow. Because shallow work creates shallow results. You cannot build anything powerful with a distracted mind. It doesn't work. You don't need their permission to disconnect. You need discipline to stay focused. You have a choice. Jump between distractions
or lock into one thing. Deep focus creates exponential results. When you focus deeply, everything changes. Your thinking sharpens. Your output increases. Your results multiply. Because you are not just working. You are immersed, fully engaged. No distractions, no interruptions, no divided attention. Just pure execution. And that level of focus is rare. That's why it's powerful. Because while others are scattered, you are concentrated. And concentration creates force. That's the key. Distraction is designed to control you. Understand this. Distraction is not accidental. It's engineered. Apps, platforms, content, all designed to capture your attention, to keep you scrolling, watching, clicking, because your attention is valuable. And if you don't control it, someone else will. That's the reality. So you take it back. You don't react to every notification. You don't check everything instantly. You don't give your focus away freely. You protect it aggressively. You have a choice. Be controlled by distraction or control your attention. Eliminate everything that pulls you away. Focus is not just about working harder. It's about removing what doesn't matter. Distractions, interruptions, low-value inputs. They all steal your power. So you cut them without hesitation. Turn off notifications. Limit unnecessary conversations. Create space for deep work. Because every interruption resets your focus, and rebuilding it takes time. That's the cost. So you eliminate it. You don't negotiate. You don't justify. You remove it. That's the key. Single tasking is your superpower. Multitasking is a lie. It feels productive, but it's not. It splits your attention, reduces your quality, slows your progress. You're not doing more. You're doing less, poorly. So you stop. You focus on one thing, one task, one goal, one direction, until it's done. Then you move to the next. That's how real progress happens. Through completion, not constant switching. You have a choice. Do many things halfway, or do one thing completely. Train your focus like a skill. Focus is not automatic. It's trained. Just like strength. Just like discipline. Daily. You sit down to work. You stay. No checking your phone. No switching tasks. No distractions. Even when it's boring. Especially when it's boring. Because boredom is part of focus. If you escape it, you weaken your ability to concentrate. But if you stay, you strengthen it. That's the key. You build focus through resistance. Guard your environment ruthlessly. Your environment shapes your focus. Noise kills it. Clutter weakens it. Interruptions destroy it. So you control your space. You create an environment that supports concentration. Quiet. Clean. Intentional. You remove anything that disrupts your flow, because focus is fragile. And once it's broken, it takes time to rebuild. You don't need their permission to create boundaries. You enforce them.
Time means nothing without focus. You can work for hours and achieve nothing. Or you can work for 1 hour and make massive progress. The difference? Focus, not time. Because focused effort multiplies output. Unfocused effort wastes it. So stop measuring how long you work. Start measuring how deeply you focus. That's the key. Depth over duration.
Protect your peak energy. You are not equally focused all day. There are moments when your energy is high, when your mind is sharp, when your focus is strongest. That's when you do your most important work. Not later, not when you're tired. Now. You protect those moments. No distractions, no low-value tasks, only high-impact work. Because that's when you produce your best results. You have a choice. Waste your peak energy or invest it.
Focus compounds over time. Every focused session builds momentum. Every distraction breaks it. So you stack focus, day after day, session after session, and over time, it compounds. Your output increases. Your speed improves. Your results accelerate. That's how exponential growth happens. Not through random effort, through consistent focus. That's the key. Where my focus goes, my power grows. Say it again. Where my focus goes, my power grows. When distractions appear, you ignore them. When boredom hits, you stay. When your mind wants to escape, you bring it back. That's focus. That's discipline. That's power.
Chapter takeaway. Distraction is the enemy. It steals your attention. It weakens your thinking. It slows your progress. If you want to grow, you must eliminate it. Aggressively. You focus deeply. You work intentionally. You remove everything that pulls you away. Because focus creates results. Focus creates speed. Focus creates power. You have a choice. Stay scattered or become locked in. Where my focus goes, my power grows. But focus alone is not enough. Because even with focus, even with discipline, if your identity is weak, your actions will not last. That's why the next step is critical. You must build an identity that demands success. And that's exactly where we're going next.
Chapter 12. Build an identity that demands success. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity. That's the truth most people ignore. They set big goals. They feel excited. They make plans. But nothing changes. Why? Because their identity stays the same. And your identity always wins. Every time. If you see yourself as average, you will act average. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you will behave inconsistently. If you see yourself as someone who quits, you will quit. That's the pattern. Not because you lack potential, because you haven't changed who you are. You have a choice. Keep chasing goals or become the person who achieves them. That's the key. Goals don't change you. Identity does. Goals are temporary. Identity is permanent. You can set a goal today and forget it tomorrow. But your identity follows you everywhere. It shapes your thinking. It shapes your actions. It shapes your results. That's why goals fail. Because people try to achieve something without becoming someone. They want success without changing their identity. It doesn't work. You don't get results by wishing. You get results by becoming. That's the shift. Stop identifying with weakness. Listen carefully. You are not your past. You are not your habits. You are not your mistakes. You are not your excuses. But if you keep repeating them,
You make them your identity. I'm not disciplined. I'm not focused. I'm just not that type of person. Stop. That language is destroying you, because every time you say it, you reinforce it. You make it real. You don't need their permission to change your identity. You decide it. Right now. You have a choice. Stay the same or redefine who you are. Become the person who does what others won't. Success is not complicated. It's uncomfortable. It requires things most people avoid: discipline, consistency, focus, sacrifice. And most people won't do it. That's why most people stay average. So if you want different results, you must become different. You must do what others won't. Work when you don't feel like it. Stay focused when others get distracted. Push when others quit. That's the identity. Not someone who tries. Someone who executes. That's the key.
Act like your future self now. Stop waiting to become successful. Act like it now. How does your future self think? How do they act? What do they tolerate? You already know. They don't procrastinate. They don't make excuses. They don't waste time. So why are you? Because you're acting like your current identity, not your future one. That must change. Immediately. You align your actions with who you want to become, not who you used to be. That's the shift. You have a choice. Act like your past or act like your future.
Identity is built through repetition. You don't change your identity by thinking. You change it by doing. Repeatedly. Every action is a vote for the person you are becoming. You act with discipline, you become disciplined. You stay focused, you become focused. You execute daily, you become consistent. That's how identity is built. Not once, not occasionally, daily, through action. That's the key. Stop negotiating with yourself. Weak identity negotiates. Maybe later. Just this once. I'll start tomorrow. Strong identity doesn't. It decides once and follows through. No debate, no excuses, no delay. Because discipline is not optional. It's who you are. That's the difference. You have a choice. Negotiate with yourself or command yourself. Raise your standards permanently. Your identity is defined by your standards. What you accept, what you tolerate, what you allow. If your standards are low, your results will be low. Always. So you raise them. Permanently. No more excuses. No more inconsistency. No more distraction. That's not who you are anymore. You don't go back. You move forward. That's the key. Detach from old patterns. Your old habits will try to pull you back. Old thinking, old behaviors, old excuses. They are familiar, comfortable, but they are not aligned with who you're becoming. So you detach. You recognize them, and you reject them. Immediately. You don't entertain them. You don't justify them. You eliminate them. Because every time you go back, you weaken your new identity. You have a choice. Return to old patterns or reinforce new ones. Build unshakable self-trust. Identity is built on trust. Trust in yourself. That when you decide something, you follow through. That when things get hard, you don't quit. That when you commit,
You stay consistent. That trust is everything. Because without it, you doubt yourself. You hesitate. You overthink. You stop. But with it, you move confidently. You act quickly. You stay consistent. That's power. That's the key.
Your identity defines your limits. If you believe you're limited, you act limited. If you believe you're capable, you act capable. It's that simple. Your identity sets the ceiling. So if you want more, you must expand who you believe you are. Not slowly, immediately. You stop seeing yourself as average. You stop thinking small. You stop acting weak. You become someone who demands more from yourself every day. You have a choice. Stay within your limits or break them.
Repeat the standard. This is who you are now. I am becoming unstoppable. Say it again. I am becoming unstoppable. Not someday, not later, now. Through your actions, through your discipline, through your consistency. That's how identity is built. That's how success becomes inevitable.
Chapter takeaway. You don't rise to goals. You fall to identity. So if you want better results, you must become better. Not temporarily, permanently. You stop identifying with weakness. You act like your future self. You build habits that reinforce your new identity. Daily, consistently, relentlessly. Because identity is not what you say, it's what you do. You have a choice. Stay who you are or become who you need to be. I am becoming unstoppable. But identity alone is not enough. Because even with a strong identity, you must maintain it. You must protect it. You must refuse to fall back into average behavior. That's why the next step is critical. You must refuse to stay average. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 13. Refuse to stay average. Average is everywhere. It's normal. It's accepted. It's comfortable. And that's why it's dangerous. Because average doesn't feel like failure. It feels fine, good enough, safe enough, easy enough. But fine will destroy your potential, quietly, over time. Average is a choice, and so is greatness. Read that again. No one forces you to stay average. No one locks you into it. You choose it through your actions, through your standards, through your decisions. Every single day. You have a choice. Accept average or reject it completely. That's the key.
Most people settle without realizing it. They don't say, I want to be average. They say, this is enough. I'm doing okay. I don't need more. But underneath that is fear. Fear of failure. Fear of discomfort. Fear of standing out. So they settle. Not because they have to, because it's easier. Easier to stay where they are. Easier to avoid pressure. Easier to follow the crowd. And over time, that becomes their life. Not bad, not great, just average. You don't do that. You have a choice. Settle quietly or demand more from yourself. Average thinking creates average results. You cannot think average and expect extraordinary results. It doesn't work. If your goals are small, your actions will be small. If your standards are low, your results will match them. That's the pattern. Average thinking leads to average behavior. Average behavior leads to average outcomes. So if you want more,
You must think differently, bigger, stronger, more demanding. That's the shift. That's the key. You must reject mediocrity completely. Not sometimes, not when you feel motivated. Always. Because average will try to pull you back. It will say, take it easy. Do it later. This is enough. And if you listen, you lose. So you reject it. Every time. You don't tolerate laziness. You don't accept inconsistency. You don't allow weak effort. Not because you're perfect, because you're committed. Committed to growth. Committed to discipline. Committed to becoming more. You don't need their permission to raise your standards. You decide. Raise your standards daily. This is how you separate yourself. Not in one big moment. In daily decisions. How you work. How you think. How you act. Every day, you raise the standard. Slightly. You push a little harder. You focus a little longer. You execute a little better. And over time, that compounds massively. That's the key. Small improvements, repeated consistently, create extraordinary results. You have a choice. Stay the same or improve daily. Stop comparing yourself to average people. This is a trap. You look around and think, I'm doing better than most. So you relax. You slow down. You lower your effort. Because compared to average, you feel ahead. But that comparison is weak. Because average is the baseline, not the goal. You don't measure yourself against mediocrity. You measure yourself against your potential. And your potential is far beyond average. That's the truth. You have a choice. Compare down or rise up. Greatness requires separation. You cannot stay like everyone else and become exceptional. It doesn't work. You must separate in thinking, in action, in discipline. You do more. You focus deeper. You stay consistent longer. While others quit, you continue. While others relax, you push. While others settle, you demand more. That's the difference. That's the key. Discomfort is the price of greatness. You cannot avoid it. If you want more, you must do more. If you want better, you must become better. And that requires discomfort, effort, discipline, sacrifice. Most people avoid it. That's why they stay average. But you don't. You embrace it. Because you understand. Discomfort is temporary. Growth is permanent. You have a choice. Avoid discomfort or use it to rise. You must decide who you are. At some point, you must decide. Not hope, not wish. Decide. Are you average or are you becoming something more? Because your actions must match that decision. Every day. You don't switch back and forth. You commit. Fully. That's the shift. That's the key. Refuse to lower your standards. There will be days when you feel tired, unmotivated, distracted. And in those moments, you will be tempted to lower your standards, to do less, to relax, to take it easy. That's where most people fall. But you don't. You hold the line. You maintain the standard. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because discipline is not tested when it's easy. It's tested when it's difficult. You have a choice. Lower your standards or prove your identity. Build a life that is not average. This is not just about work. It's about everything. How you think, how you act, how you live. You don't accept average in any area. Not your mindset, not your habits, not your effort. You raise everything. Because excellence is not selective. It's consistent. That's the key. Repeat the standard. This is your mindset now. Average is not my option. Say it again. Average is not my option. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You reject it completely. Through your actions. Through your discipline. Through your standards. That's how you rise. That's how you separate. Chapter takeaway. Average is a choice, and most people choose it. Not because they have to, because it's easy. But you are not most people. You refuse to settle. You raise your standards daily. You push beyond comfort. You demand more from yourself because you know what's possible. You know what you're capable of, and you refuse to live below it. You have a choice. Accept average or build something greater. Average is not my option. And now, everything comes together because you've built the mindset, discipline, focus, responsibility, execution. But none of it matters if you don't apply it consistently. That's where everything is decided. And that's exactly what we bring together in the final closing. Thinking like a trillionaire is not about money. It's about power, control, discipline. It's about how you think when things get hard. It's about what you do when no one is watching. It's about refusing to accept limits, no matter what. You now have the blueprint. Think bigger, act faster, stay disciplined. No excuses, no hesitation, no limits. But knowledge means nothing without action. So starting now, not tomorrow, not later, now. Raise your standards. Control your mind. Execute relentlessly. Because the moment you commit to this way of thinking, you stop living an average life. And you start becoming unstoppable.